Today, I'm going to share a start to finish editing video of one of my favorite images using ON1's Photo RAW. Well, hey everyone, it's Hudson. Welcome to this week's video. I have a kind of a special treat today. I'm going to share a video that I did for ON1's Plus photographic education community. Normally it's exclusive for Plus members, but I'm going to share it because I know there's a lot of you that are Photo RAW users or people who are a little curious about what is this ON1 software that I'm talking about. If you're a member of the Plus community, you've already seen this video, well, maybe you take a break on this one. If you're someone who's curious about what's cool about ON1's photo editing software, well, this is a great video for you. I'm going back and I'm editing a video, or I'm editing an image from Cuba that I captured not long before COVID, that I'm using the latest version of their software, ON1 Photo RAW 2022.5. And I'm really focusing in not only on the complete edit of the image, but also on distraction removal and how you can do some subtle things without a whole lot of work to just make the subject of your image stand out. So we'll talk a little bit about distraction removal and subduing some things that stand out that are too bright or eye-catching or colorful around the edges of the frame. It's a street photo. I hope you enjoy it, and it gives you a little window into what's possible in ON1's Photo RAW software. So before I launch into that video, just a little note, I'm actually out teaching workshops in the Owens Valley, Grand Teton National Park, and Yellowstone National Park while you're watching this. You can leave comments, you can hit me up with questions, but I might be a little slower to answer. But on that topic of questions, my good friend Rick LePage, who's co-leading the workshop with me, and my friends David Archer and CJ Glenn are going to be taking some of your questions on the road, doing some roadside ATSs in spectacular spots to questions that you submit. And you can submit those when you sign up for our next big group get-together, our free photography meeting, our office hours, which we're going to hold on a Tuesday after we get back from these workshops. So sign up for that at hudsonhenry.com/office hours and submit a question there when you're signing up, and who knows, maybe you'll see it in an upcoming ATS in the middle of the Grand Teton National Park. All right, also, I just want to give a quick shout out and thanks to everybody who's been sharing, liking, and subscribing to the channel and using my links to buy gear. That helps me out. All right, everybody, so check out this video. I think you might enjoy it. Well, hey everyone, Hudson here. Today, I want to focus on some of the powerful tools that you have for distraction removal and maybe some ways of thinking outside the box a little bit to just simply focus the eye on what's important in an image and get rid of some distractions that maybe you couldn't avoid capturing. We're going to go through a street scene that I captured in Havana a few years ago, and I'll do a complete re-edit of this older image, kind of using the powerful tools that we have in Photo RAW 22.5, but I really want to focus in on distraction removal and the importance of kind of working those edges of the scene. Sometimes when we're out in the landscape and we're composing a scene, that's something we can take our time and really work our way into, maybe using a tripod, getting in just the right position, thinking about making sure that the entire sort of composition serves our intended scene. When we're doing things like shooting motion or an event or street photography or wildlife, sometimes that's not as simple, and we need to really think about, how can we clean up those edges? How can we bring the eye in and focus it on what's important in the scene? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to do a complete edit, like I said. I'll also talk just a little bit about how I have set up my optimum performance with my new Mac Studio computer, because I had some people ask me that after I did the organizing video and kind of mentioned I'm using a Mac Studio. And I'll take you on a little trip through Cuba, since I'm gearing up for my 2023 Cuba workshop this next spring. Super excited about it, and I've been going through images, and that's kind of what inspired me to do this video and look back at this older image. That was a trip I had planned to do in 2020, but COVID struck and I had to cancel those workshops that I had planned for Cuba then, and it's exciting to be rerunning them now. We go on a Helping the Cuban People visa where we stay with local people, meet with local people and artists, hear about some of the hardships that they endure there, and also some of the ways that they are creating a better place. And Cuba is just a really, really special place with wonderful, wonderful, warm people. And it's an experience that's unlike any place else I've traveled. I mean, it just feels as if the hands of time have frozen a little bit. And that will likely change in the not so distant future. So, you know, and that will probably be best for the local people there. But it's an amazing place to visit, and yeah, just an incredible, incredible trip. I can't wait to get back on. You know, one of the things that I did on that trip was walked around with a limited kit. That was the first time I went on a trip without a DSLR. I was only carrying my Nikon Z6 and Z7, the original mirrorless cameras. I think it was back in 2019, not long after I got those cameras. And I chose to go lighter, and I took, I think, a 24 to 70, 14 to 30 millimeter lens, a 50 millimeter 1.4 or 50 millimeter 1.8 for the Z system, 24 to 70, and then this 105 millimeter portrait lens for the F mount with an FTZ adapter. I have that on my Z9 right now. And this is an incredible lens. And in roaming the streets of Havana, I found myself really enjoying just working with a prime. You know, it's so light, so easy. It kind of challenged me to think in different ways, being limited to a single focal length. And so I really enjoyed going out in the evening when the light was nice, finding those streets that run east-west and getting that backlight or that beautiful light late in the day with a prime lens, a fast prime lens, lower light situations, my Nikon Z6, which was so amazing at high ISO. I'm filming with the Z6 II right now. I love doing video with it too. But working with a prime lens was just amazing. I'm really excited. You know, I have a Leica Q2 with this just amazing 28 millimeter 1.7. I can't wait to take that out into the streets of Havana. But I was kind of working in the opposite way with a long lens with the image that we're going to look at. So we'll take a look at that. We'll talk a little about some strategies that I used to capture this scene. Some of the things I couldn't avoid with distractions in the scene. We'll work that out. First, I want to talk just really briefly about how I've got Photo RAW set up here, and then I'll take you on a little tour of Havana and we'll edit this image. But, you know, going here into preferences, you know, people have asked me, you're always recommending a scratch drive, and on your PC, you had set up a drive, an internal SSD to be the scratch drive. Well, I can't do that with the Mac Studio because it's a box where you can't add more than the hard drive that comes from Apple. But this computer has 6 Thunderbolt 4 ports, very, very fast, 40 gigabytes per second capability. And what I've done is picked up a 500 gigabyte M.2 SSD drive and put it into this OWC Envoy Express M.2 enclosure that's Thunderbolt. And so it comes in at about 1.5 gigabytes a second, really, really fast transfer rate. Faster than, you know, than a lot of internal drives on the computers that we're traditionally editing with. Faster than the SSD drive that I had in my PC as a scratch drive. I just got a 500 gigabyte drive. It's not that expensive with this enclosure. Plugged it in, and that's where I'm pointing both my scratch folder and my cache folder here in the system preferences of Photo RAW. And that's keeping my system humming along, giving it plenty of room to write scratch data, which was something that it would do if it ran out of RAM and it needed to sort of write virtual memory to sort of emulate RAM. Say you were doing a big panoramic merge or an HDR that's really, really complicated, the software will perform better having a scratch drive, as well as moving its cache onto a very fast drive that's not your main hard drive, so they're not in competition for data. So I still recommend doing that, no matter what system you've got. Plug in a fast external SSD to a fast port on your computer, or use an internal drive that's not your main hard drive and software drive. It's really nice to have data on one drive, your scratch drive on another, and your operating system and software on yet another drive, and have all those be fast. All right, so Havana, as I said, just an amazing, amazing place. I went with my family. Here's my wife and son Pike, who he's much smaller there. You know, we wouldn't be carrying him that way. He's starting first grade next week. My Aunt Denise and my daughter Pepper, who's going to be starting kindergarten next week. We had an amazing local guide, Javier, just an incredible guy. And just walking the streets, seeing all the pageantry and the beautiful old architecture of Havana, which just amazing. The food and drink, I can't more highly recommend. The local music, incredible. The beaches, the countryside. I love this farming valley, where this town Vignale is. It's all limestone, and lots more horse-drawn carts than cars. Beautiful scenery. These limestone eroded mountains are just gorgeous. And of course, the cars that are out there are these just spectacular older cars. And I just, you're drawn to those old cars and the colors in Havana and the people. It was just a blast to be out there photographing. And as I said, I walked the streets with this prime 105mm. And this is one of my favorite images from the whole trip. It's that, like I talked about, I love to go out into the streets late in the evening where the sun is coming down, people are out into the day, and you've got backlighting or side lighting, depending on what street you're working on, and these old cars moving through the cobblestone streets. So I captured this image, and you'll notice, I think that this guy's orange vest is really distracting. I don't mind the people. I love the light. I don't mind the blown out highlights. We'll talk about dealing with blown out highlights in these types of situations too. This guy right here, a little distracting. I don't like this car, this water bottle. Actually, the reflection of the bumper, we'll talk about that in a minute. I've had some people say you're crazy to think about removing that, but to me it's too close down on the edge. It draws my eye down too close to the edge, and I couldn't avoid it. Using a 105mm lens, this was what I was able to capture. And I'll show you sort of the setup. I'm walking the streets, and I notice this car coming up the street, and that it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And so, I focus in, snap a shot over this gentleman's shoulder. He's the one who's standing off to the side. And then, he clears out of the way, and I notice this puddle as it's coming, and I raced forward, got closer to the puddle, and got down low as the car approached, got it in focus, as it's coming closer and closer, I wanted its tires just hitting that puddle of water. Now, if I'd had a wider lens, yes, I probably would have opened up a little bit and been able to get more of the reflection of the car in the puddle. But these are the situations you deal with in street photography, and particularly the situations you deal with a prime lens in street photography, which I think is a great way to go. It's just so much less to be carrying around, so much quicker to work with. So let's delve in and let's do some editing of this particular image. And I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to create a virtual copy of it. I'm going to right click, or a version I should say. I'm going to create a version of this file, which is just going to be a separate set of instructions on how to process this image. So we've got, this, let me go back to my grid view so you can see what I'm doing. I've created a virtual, or a version right here, all right? And you can tell that it's a version from that little triangular marking, that square that's half black triangle, half white triangle down in the bottom right corner. That means it's a version. Also, the one that I put up here up front is a version I created just to kind of throw into the grid for you all. So we're gonna go in, we'll edit this one, and then we can refer back. We don't have a full res thumbnail built there, but I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna jump into edit, and there we go. And I like to keep my left panel that has presets and everything closed. We're not going to work with presets. I'll just do everything I would normally do on this image. And you can see it's just straight out of camera here. So let's talk about what is important in this image and what is the distraction. I don't think that the people in this image are that distracting. It shows that the street is alive and full of life. I don't particularly want to be drawn to this car right here, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and crop. I don't like the water bottle, the litter on the street. So we're going to have to do a couple of things here. And I think the first thing I want to do is a little cropping. I know I want to crop this image a little bit. I don't want it to be a square crop. I want to be freeform. And I'm just going to go ahead and reset the crop with the freeform tool here so that I can make it exactly what I want. And I know I want to get rid of this car. Actually, I want to straighten it a little bit too. You're running along with a prime lens. You can tell things are a little off. The architecture on the left is just slanted a little bit. The right tire feels higher. It just feels like the world's a little cattywampus. So I'm going to click just outside that grid, or just outside that crop rectangle, and you can see I get this little symbol there with the circle and the arrow, and that means I can rotate. I'm just going to drag down, and I'm watching that grid that pops up. I love how ON1 gives us a grid, and I'm kind of balancing it between the tires seeming level. One's in the water, so it's tough to see, and the architecture on the left of the image in particular. So getting this line straight up and down. So I'm just going to drag around a little bit like that, and then I might pull down just a little bit more, and I'm going to come in so that I just lose the edge of that car, and I don't crop any part of the guy. We're not going to get rid of the guy. You could go in and you could spend an inordinate amount of time cloning this person out, but I don't think we need to. I think that we just need to make him less of a distraction, and I'm going to show you a quicker and easier way than going to all that work of cloning and trying to match the architecture here and its blurred vision. You know, it's not impossible, but it's a lot of work, and I'd rather just still show the streets alive with people and not have your eye drawn to them. We'll talk about how we're going to do that. So I'm going to move in on the left a little bit. And I'm going to come up. Now, some people are going to say I'm crazy to get rid of the reflection in the puddle, but it's on the edge to me. It really pulls your eye away from what's important in the scene, which is the car itself. I think that's fine, right about maybe there. I don't think that the little bit of bumper reflection here is bad at all. All right, so now we're a little bit straighter. You know, we might even want to rotate a little bit more. I'm going to click the crop icon one more time. And just looking at the license plate here, I'm just going to pull it just a little bit more, like so. I think that's better. And I might come in just a smidge because of that rotation. And we can come up a little. I think that's great. I'm going to hit enter. Boom. Yeah, there we go. That's the composition that I want, right there. All right, that kind of car off center. The people are actually pulling me in. I just don't like this orange, and I don't like his blue shirt. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to edit the image to get the look that I want, just its basic raw processing, just its tone and color. We'll do some more editing. We'll do some local adjustments in a second here to continue with this. But I want to just adjust its basic tone and color. And you know, I said there's blown out highlights. We're going to do one thing at the very end in effects to make sure that that isn't something that's going to ruin a print if we make a print of this. I'll talk about that in a second. But what we're going to do right now is I'm going to click this little arrow on my levels. I've got levels activated right here. I'm going to click this little arrow on the right, which is going to show what in the highlights is blown out. It's going to give us a red image of that. And that gives me a little idea. You know, if I pulled exposure all the way back, you can tell that the detail in those highlights is blown out. You know, it's not like we're going to save detail in the sky, and the sky is not important. These are what I would call specular highlights and a little spot of sky in the canyon of the buildings here. What's important is that the exposure for the car is right. The camera nailed that. So, you know, when I do something with specular highlights like this, I go at it nice and easy. I'm going to pull whites back before pulling highlights back a little bit globally in this image, and I might just gently pull exposure a little bit. Ooh, look at that. All of a sudden, I haven't done too much to really block out my shadows or anything, but we really minimized what's pure white in the image. We got a tiny bit. I'm not going to go through the heroics needed to get rid of these little bits on the edge of these specular highlights. I can go ahead and turn this off. I'll show you how I will make sure that there's no pure white in this image when I'm done editing it. It's the last thing we're going to do. And then I'm going to take my shadows and just have a look at maybe just boosting those enough that I see a little detail on the tire treads. And then let's take contrast up a little bit. I like the contrast in this scene. I think exposure's just fine. I don't want to mess with that at all. Midtones, I'm going to move to the left. I'm going to move to the right. I think I like the moodiness of it. I'm not going to alter that much at all. I think we're pretty good right about there. That's really well exposed. Anything else we do, we're going to do with local adjustments. I think the color balance is nice. It's got that warm late day sun look to it. Yeah, we're looking great. All right, so there we go. Now let's talk about digging in and doing some distraction removal. So the first thing I want to do, I want to get rid of this water bottle and this little bit of trash right there. And I'm going to do that by going into my retouch tools, and I'm going to choose my favorite of the retouch tools, which is the Perfect Eraser. It does such a good job when you're getting rid of some distraction that's on texture like these cobblestones. So I'm just going to make my brush a little bit bigger than the bottle, and I do that with the left bracket key makes it smaller, the right bracket key on my keyboard makes it bigger, and I'm just going to kind of paint. I'm going to make sure I overlap it a little bit. I'm putting that little red outline around the bottle, and this is just an automated tool, and 9 times out of 10 in a situation like this, it does a great job. Sometimes you need to shrink your tool down and just kind of make sure that you hit a couple of little spots in it. Let it do that. Maybe one more blip of that. Going side to side. Blammo. That looks amazing. And then I'm going to make my brush even a little bit smaller, and I'm just going to take this little red bit of trash out of here. Done. Turn it into puddle. Bam. So that's one distraction gone. That's a great tool. All right, so we've straightened, we've gotten rid of that foreground distraction, both by eliminating the license plate reflection that drew our eye to the bottom and getting rid of the little bit of trash that was in front of the car. Now, I want to go in and I want to make this guy less obtrusive in my scene. And I'm going to do that with a local adjustment, all right? I don't want to drop my exposure. What I do want to do is I want to take contrast down. I want to take the color temperature and make him warmer to match the wall a little bit. And I want to take saturation way down. And I might just take exposure down a little bit. You know, we can always adjust these after we paint. And I'm going to use my Perfect masking brush, all right? We are painting in here. We have 100% opacity and a 100% feather. So it's a soft edged brush. But I'm going to resize my brush, and I'm going to make sure I don't go outside of my guy here, all right? I'm just going to paint every sort of little bit of tonality of him. You see I'm really hitting his hat right here. But as long as I don't take that center mark, that little target center mark in the middle of my brush outside the lines, I'm not going to be painting the wall. This is with the Perfect brush. It is edge aware and it's contrast aware. So it's really targeting only that tone that I have my brush over. If I took my brush outside the line into the white of that wall, then all of a sudden we'd be painting the wall. Right now, because I'm being really careful with the brush, I'm only painting this gentleman staring at the car. Now I've probably overdone what I'm doing right now, but you get the idea. By kind of overdoing the sliders before I start, I can really see the effect as I paint it in. All right, so now I'm gonna do his shorts and kind of that shadow line of his shirt. And then let's do his legs. It's just making his legs warmer. And then his socks, we're making his socks kind of yellow there. I don't know that that's as important. His socks, oops, I went over the line. So I just hit Control Z or Command Z for the Mac, and that's going to undo the last thing that I did. All right, the last brush move right there. I don't like with that. I think actually his feet aren't that big a deal. I'm going to hit Command Z a couple times. I'm going to shrink my brush down. All right, and I really want to just hit his shoes. That's the biggest thing. I think his socks are actually not that big a deal, but we can take them in. I think again we're going to really reduce a lot of this effect that we've put. I think we've pulled the warmth up more than is probably necessary. You'll see what I'm talking about when I start playing with the sliders. All right, so he's well painted. He's really targeted. This whole local adjustment is really just that guy. Let's back our color temperature slider back down. So he's not going to be as glowingly yellow. We're going to take our saturation slider down even a little bit more. All right. I don't know that he needs to be darkened so much. That almost makes him stand out. Well, maybe just a little. Contrast can go down so that he's less contrasty, the tones within and of himself. Now, if I turn this off and on, he's way more distracting without doing that. You see how we just muted all the color and he blends more into the background? He's still a person standing there. Nothing looks odd. He's in the shadows. You know, we've tweaked the balance here with the color to where it doesn't look unnatural like when we had the bright yellow socks. He just is faded into the wall, all right? No longer draws your eye the same way that he once did. All right, so let's add another adjustment, and let's take on this, this bright orange vest that this probably construction worker is wearing. I'm gonna double click the exposure here of this new adjustment to zero it out. I don't really want to make, well, maybe just a little dark, but not that huge amount of darkness that was the default. We're going to turn the color temperature cooler once again, but saturation way down. You know, I really want to be painting saturation out. And so that's probably enough to see what we're doing. And I'm going to go and zoom in. I'm going to grab my, well, I'll just hit Command plus. That would be Control plus for the PC user. That zooms me way in. We're at 200% view right now, more than 100% view. You can see how sharp this image is. People who say the original Z camera wouldn't autofocus, this was firmware version 2, and I thought it was pretty amazing by then. All right, so I've got that perfect edge aware setting on. I'm going to just paint on all the orange. And you can see, you know, once again, I think we're overdoing it right now. We are overdoing it for sure. All right, I'm mainly focused on his vest. It looks off right now because our settings are too extreme. I'm just going everything orange in here that the camera captured as orange, even that little bit on the wall. And I think it's almost just like pixels bleeding over there. I'm going to come through. I'm going to increase my brush size with that right bracket key, whether you're PC or Mac. Almost all the software that you use for photo editing, brush size is controlled with the bracket keys, and that's the same in ON1 to their credit, just so that everybody stays consistent. And we're just getting rid of this orange, okay? Gonna be erring on the side of getting rid of. And then I'm gonna take, yeah, there we go, just a little bit more. He's already muted because he's in shadow. It's just that that orange stood out like a sore thumb. All right, so let's use Command minus and get back out of here, scroll over a bit, and we got a little bit more realistic view now. And we're gonna just maybe bring our exposure slider up a little bit, our saturation slider up. It doesn't need to be so completely blotted out. It just needs to be more muted, right? And that's gonna make it blend better, like we didn't do anything. I'm gonna just pull everything back a little bit to where it's no longer as distracting. See, if it were all the way up, still super orange and distracting. It's just about moving that slider to the point where it's not catching my eye in a way that bothers me as the photographer. I just don't really want it to be eye-catching. And just again, you know, I'm just playing with the sliders while I watch, while I keep my eye really carefully on that particular portion of the frame. All right, now I really want to come back. We're looking at this, yeah, we're in a fit view again here. And I think that if we turn that off, back on, it's a pretty major effect. You know, again, I think it doesn't need to be as darkened maybe. There we go. That looks a little more natural. I don't want it to look like I did anything. I just want it to not catch my eye. All right, so there you go. Now, let's go ahead. Let's make sure we're in that fit view. I'm going to grab my zoom tool and say fit. Oh yeah, we were at 100%. That's where we were. All right, cool. Back to it. All right, looking good to me. We've definitely gotten rid of a bunch of distractions here. You know, one other thing that we can play around with in our develop panel under the tone and color is recover highlight hue. It's always something I like to check when I've got a blown out highlight like this. Sometimes it gets into kind of a garish look. Sometimes it just gives us a little more natural color, turning it on. Yeah, I like that. I think that's actually giving us something a little better than not having that activated there. So, you know, once again, if we hit our, oh wow, we've actually done quite a bit to get rid of highlights that are specular highlights in here. I still am gonna go through and just make sure there's nothing pure white after we're done with the editing process. But all of a sudden now, you know, if we turn off our preview, we have a look at what it looked like before and after, that's pretty amazing. That's definitely working. All right. let's go in and just add a few effects here that I would strongly consider. And I would do a little dynamic contrast here. You know, I think people that know me, I probably sound like a broken record, but I go in, I do dynamic contrast. I feel like the initial default setting is a little intense for me, so I like to do my own little style that I've created. You can always adjust these sliders how you like, and if you find yourself doing the same thing over and over, you can just hit save a new style. Right there, I've got one called HHDC. That stands for Hudson Henry Dynamic Contrast. Surprise, surprise. And what that does is it backs the small details, the micro contrast and sharpening in the very smallest details in the scene, you know, these little cobbles and texture on the sidewalk, down to a 4 setting, medium details to 12, and large details to 15. It's a subtle boost in micro contrast and sharpening in different levels of details that I just like, and then I back my opacity down to 77. So that's stored for me. That 77 opacity, 4, 12, 15. That's just a setting I like a lot. But I don't want it applied to these soft, beautiful, out of focus details and edges in the back of the scene. So how do I do that? Here's where I find Photo RAW just amazing. So I'm going to use some just simple masking here with a soft brush. I'm going to click on this little icon here, the mask icon on my filter here, dynamic contrast. And I'm going to go ahead and say invert. And what that does is it puts a black mask over the whole effect. Now it's not affecting any part of the image, not even the part I do want it to affect. Okay, so well, now what I need to do is paint in. So I'm going to paint this effect in with my masking brush, soft, 100% feather. I want 100% opacity. The part I do want to add all this dynamic contrast to, I want to apply it in total. So I'm just going to make my brush big with that right bracket key. Once again, it's still that masking brush. And I'm just going to go in here and paint in the sharp, detailed part of the scene that I want. All right, so I'm painting the bumper and the Chevrolet logo and emblem and the license plate, and underneath on the street and the part of the street that's sharp. And when I let go, oh, I had that perfect brush activated. I actually don't want that here. I want to paint it every bit that's sharp in. No differentiation between the different tones that I passed that center point of my brush over. You know, it was helping us when we did distraction removal, and we only wanted to paint the guy's vest or the gentleman on the right. Now I really just do want to paint all the sharp parts of the image in with the dynamic contrast that I want to add. So there, now I'm just creating, everywhere that's white, that effect is coming through. Everywhere that's black, it's not. When I toggle it, it's only giving a little bit more pop. Look at that, watch the headlight as compared to the people in the background. So nothing's changing with those soft, beautifully rendered out of focus details that you pay the big bucks for a 105 1.4 to render, but it is making the sharp part of the image pop just that little bit extra. So that's worth it. And if you wanted to use this particular mask we've created that only covers the sharp part of the image, it would be as easy as copying it, and then I could apply it to another filter if I wanted to do that. I'm going to add a little bit of glow to the background here, so I'm going to utilize what I just did. Here, check this out. So I'm going to grab my sunshine filter, and I like the glow setting in the sunshine filter, all right? But I find it too strong at times. Like, I'm looking at what's going on in the background here. I like what it's doing to the parts of the scene, but I don't particularly like what it's doing to the car and the part of the scene that I don't want it in. So I'm gonna back its opacity down just a little bit. I'm gonna back the glow off just a little bit. It's a little overdone to me. I can back the warmth down just a smidge. It's just a subtle effect that I'm after. And then I want to go in and I'm gonna paste that mask in. Well, now it's the opposite, right? It's not being applied to the part of the scene I want it, and it is being applied to the scene I don't want. Well, that's as easy as clicking once again, invert. Now we've just inverted the mask, and I can tweak it a little bit more. So I can paint that, let's say, in or out, all right? I could paint it out and make sure it's really not being applied to this part of the scene I don't want it. I know it isn't, but there you get the idea. And then we could say we do want it painted in. We can make sure it's painted into the part of the scene we do want it painted in, which is really these highlights in our scene. The roof of the car, inclusive of this guy standing over in the corner, I think, too. It's just doing some nice things over there. All right, so paint it in, all right? Finally, we could do, oops, I keep bumping. That's a little hotkey for me to go to my desktop, but I didn't mean to do that. So we'll go in, we're gonna add a filter, one more, and well, two more actually. I'm gonna do a color enhancing filter. It's a filter I love, and I'm gonna go into my desert preset, and it's gonna overdo this, I think. It's turning it a little bit too reddish orange and boosting that color a little bit. But I do love what it's doing down here in the shadows. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower its opacity a little bit to make it a little more subtle. That's lowering the opacity of the entire effects filter. And then I'm going to go into its orange and say I don't want it to be quite that red, and I don't want quite that much saturation. I'm just toning that filter down a little bit, watching the image as I do it. I kind of like the yellows getting pulled a little towards the orange from green, but I want to back the yellow saturation down just a little more natural. And then I might even take the overall saturation of the whole image back just a little bit. It's getting a little too intense. Boom. But I love what it's doing in that puddle. All right, and then finally, I want to add a big softy vignette to make the car stand out even that more. I'm going to hit big softy, and that's really extreme what it's doing right now. I want to take the feather all the way down to 0. That's how fast that's being blended in. You know, it's basically sort of that how soft is the edge of this mask we're creating that's darkening the outside and leaving the middle the same. And so now I can see what the shape of this is. I want it more rounded. I want it smaller. I'm going to move the size slider. I'm going to grab my centering tool. I'm going to put it right over the middle of my car, right about like that, right? Right there. All right. I can still play with roundness a little bit more. All right, I'm going to take that feather all the way back up to 100%, and it's way too intense right now. Now, some people might love the grungy look of this. It's too much for me. So I'm just going to watch my image while I pull that brightness slider up. I want it natural. I want details in my shadows. Coming up, coming up. That looks really nice, right about there. All right, and that's even more bringing our eye into what is important in this frame. All right, boom. So now if we turn on preview, turn it off, we've made a significant difference in this scene. All right. There's no doubt that this image is all about this car, and there's nothing around the edges to really pull our eye and say, ooh, you know, there's a water bottle here, there's a license plate, there's a super bright orange vest, there's a guy with a blue shirt. No, you know, I think the people in the background only add to it. You know, the streets are alive and vibrant. The car is coming to pick people up. I love that you can just read the taxi sign there. This image I love even more now. So the one thing I would be concerned about potentially is, you know, say I go to print this image, maybe there's a little bit of white in the specular highlights. Well, a simple way to make sure when you're done editing, the very last thing that you do is to go in and add one more filter, and that's going to be a curbs filter. It's down here on the bottom left of those potential filters. And all you have to do is you make sure that you're in all. You're not just adjusting the red channel, you're not just adjusting the green, you're not just adjusting the blue, you're doing all three, like the all three color channels tonality is going to be shifted. And what this is saying is, right now that, you know, this out point is at 255, 255 is the measurement. Now, if you do things in the red, green, and blue color scale, it's kind of how we used to work in the old days of Photoshop and things. Colors are measured from 0 to 255. So red, green, and blue channel 0, 0, 0 equals black. That's down here. That's pure black. Pure white is 255, 255, 255. There's 255 gradations in the color chain. So what we're going to do is just say our input's at 255, 255, 255, and I'm just going to grab that little dot on the right and pull down to where it's 250 out. So now there is no longer any pure white in our scene. We have changed pure white to very, very, very bright gray. And if we click on this little clipping mask, you can see that that's the case. There is no pure white in our image. And that's important because if you go to print this image and this has a little bit of white on the edges, there might be some spot where the printer lays down no ink at all. Some printers have a separate thing called a gloss enhancer that it puts over the image. If there's no ink, it puts it over the entire image to make it all even. Other printers don't, and if it leaves a bare piece of paper with no glistening ink on it, it looks really weird in the wrong color light. So it's an important thing to do for an image that you might one day want to print, just to do this quick little maneuver right there. All right, cool. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm throwing a link if you haven't tried ON1 software yet. I'm putting a link to a free trial of Photo RAW in this video's description. If you just click on the title or show more, you can find that, as well as a link to learn more about ON1+, which is a cool photo community where I do monthly training videos along with other photo educators. Right now, I'm off either in Owens Valley, Grand Teton, or Joshua Tree National Park with a cool group of photographers on a workshop. And so if you want to leave us a question, we'll be taking those questions from the road again. Sign up for our office hours, leave us a question, hudsonhenry.com/office hours. Huge thanks to everyone who's been sharing, liking, and subscribing to the channel and using my links. Those really, really help me out. I hope that you're able to find ways to be creative and having fun as one season shifts into another right now. It's always, here in the Northern Hemisphere, we're headed into fall, which is such a spectacular time to be out photographing. Southern Hemisphere, spring, also that kind of reawakening from winter. So if you're on the equator, it's always beautiful. You got nothing to complain about. But wherever you happen to be, I hope you're having fun, staying safe. And we'll see you next week.